We are glad tonight that you are a never-changing God. And as you have brought him hitherto, whatever many years may be beyond him, we know that you would always be there. And so we thank you, dear God, for you have enabled him to make a difference and touch so many lives according to your plan. And we just pray in the name of Jesus that your holy anointing would be upon him. And that as you have been with him over the 35 years, that you will continue to cover his defenseless head with the shadow of your wings. And we thank you, dear God, for the example that was left by our father, one who served you and walked according to your ways. And so it is in his footsteps that we have walked. And we are saying, even as the songwriter says, faith of our fathers, we will love both friend and foe in all our strife, and preach the truth as love knows how, by kindly words and virtuous life. Faith of our fathers, holy faith, we will be true to thee till death. And so tonight, we acknowledge you in our presence. We know you are here because your presence fills the entire universe. And we know that we can do nothing without you because it is in you we live and move and have our being. And so tonight, we just pray in the name of Jesus that you would have full control of this evening's proceedings and that you would be glorified. You would be exalted. For Lord, apart from you, we can do nothing. So we bless your name tonight. We say thanks be to our great God, who has always been and who ever will be. Be glorified in the heavens. Be glorified in the earth. Be glorified in our midst tonight, dear God. In the name of Jesus we pray with thanksgiving. Amen and amen. Blessed be the name of our God.
You may be seated. Kindly permit me to recognize our dignitaries and to establish the protocol that will remain as the overarching chapeau for the night's proceedings. Her Excellency, Dame Marcella Liebert, GCMG JP, Governor General of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Dr. the Honorable Jeffrey Hanley, Acting Prime Minister, and Mrs. Hanley. The Right Honorable Dr. Denzil Douglas, Senior Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs. The Honorable Garth Wilkin, Attorney General and Minister of Justice and Legal Affairs. Dr. the Honorable Joyelle Clark, Minister of Sustainable Development. The Honorable Ethelene Phillip, Minister of Youth, Aging and Disabilities. Dr. Marcus Natter, Cabinet Secretary. The Honorable Dr. Kenny Anthony, former Prime Minister of St. Lucia and current parliamentarian. Dr. Edward Green, former Deputy Secretary General of CARICOM, former United Nations Secretary General, Special Envoy for the Caribbean on HIV and AIDS. His Excellency, Michael Lin, Resident Ambassador of the Republic of China, Taiwan. His Excellency, David Rivero Perez, Resident Ambassador of the Republic of Cuba, and Mrs. Rivero Perez. Mr. Marco Antonio Guzman, Chargé d'Affaires of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, and Mrs. Guzman. His Excellency, Larry Vaughan, Ambassador to CARICOM and OECS Commissioner, His Excellency Norjan Wilson, Ambassador of St. Kitts and Nevis to the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. His Excellency Kenneth Douglas, Ambassador of Sports, His Excellency Leon Natter, Ambassador, other members of the Diplomatic and Consular Corps. Mr. Timothy Antoine, Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, and Mrs. Antoine, permanent secretaries, senior government officials, former parliamentarians, former ambassadors and advisors, members of the National Executive of the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party, executive members of the Constituency 6 branch and all constituencies represented, family members of Dr. the Right Honorable Denzil L. Douglas, specially invited guests all, teachers and students, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. I am delighted to bid a very warm welcome to every single person present here this evening. The book is Making a Difference. There was no hesitation on my part when I was invited to be the Master of Ceremonies for tonight's launch of this latest collection of speeches by the Right Honorable Dr. Denzil Douglas. Indeed, I count it an honor to be here in this capacity, having served and learned from the leadership he embodies and inspires as the first female myself elected on a Labour Party ticket, a member of his all-8 cabinet from a constituency that had never before been won by a Labour candidate. But Dr. Douglas inspires firsts. This is the quality of the giant we celebrate this evening, a man who is a natural-born leader, a strategist, and accomplished man of firsts whose legacy will be enshrined in the annals of our national history as one that fought for, underscored, and protected the rights and the potential of every citizen of our country, bolstered by the vision and the foundation laid by our first national hero, Sir Robert Llewellyn Bradshaw. Let me get into the meat of my brief introductory remarks. Who is this man? What can we learn? What is there more to know? Listen good, and then you all can say, "Is Jacinth tell me so?" We have all heard the biographical data of a man who has served his country for half of his earthly life. A St. Paul's man who grew up among his people, facing the same struggles, growing, learning, and overcoming. He was no stranger to everyday strife. Father, medical doctor, politician, believer, son of the Creator above, and friend to his fellow earthlings down below. But that is part of what is written, and everybody knows. But I bet you didn't know this. Porridge eater extraordinaire. Porridge eater extraordinaire. I am told he never misses 1 or 2 or 3 full bowls a day. Corn or oats or cream of wheat, not a single morsel will get away. As the story goes, he fills his bowl, finds the biggest spoon, and then the eating starts. And with his eye on his fellow eater's bowl, you better finish first. If it's smart, you're smart. His global accomplishments are well recorded, too many here to enumerate. From his documented contribution to action and awareness on HIV/AIDS, NCDs, and advancement of home ownership and access to tertiary education for all, international representation of the nation state, He blazed a long and distinguished trail of excellence in every sphere, on every continent, in the array of regional and international organizations. But nothing compares to the human results achieved for ordinary Kittitians and Nevisians in this, our beloved federation. Yes, the books all speak of this, and our children and their children will learn even more as time and tides ebb and flow. But I got some other juicy secrets to share so that all of you could say, is Jacinth make me know. I hear he is possessed of a serious funny bone with a sense of humor that you wouldn't believe, with a one-of-a-kind staccato baby face kind of laughter and a ton of hilarious tricks way up his sleeve. I'm also aware that the former Prime Minister says that he's never late and always arrives once everybody else is already there. For out of the kindness of his heart, he allows for ample time for planners to get it right and adequately prepare. Despite his stature, he walks tall like a champion, striding wide and stepping far, boldly standing tall, the equal of humble servants, kings and presidents, regardless to who you are. Mind ticking like a clock, his strategic thinking, his down-to-earth humility, his vast political experience, his way with words, his bold engagement, paying dividends for all. In a land that he has guided to hold its own among nations, powerful and mighty, large and small. But you are well aware already. For it's 35 years now you know this man and appreciate that that is how it goes. So let me tell you a little more, Quelbe, so you know, and it's me, Jacinth, tell you so. Shh. His public servants, them mouth let it slip, that when he travels the world, he works 24 hours straight for spite. Email, mobile, and conference calls, so for days the boss don't shut his eyes to go sleep at night. Next day, he up and bubbly. Like the Energizer Bunny, he's good to go, ready for business on the dot. And one of the PSs told me in full confidence that the boss consumes 5 square meals a day and eats a lot. For the most articles left on any flight, going anywhere, the Right Honorable gets the prize for that. For being determined to make St. Kitts-Nevis a better place, he wins that hands down, clean gone, flat. From holding down the ship of state so that this nation is poised to continue to sustainably weather all storms and still to grow. The Right Honorable Dr. Denzil Douglas has played the leading role, and the evidence is there to show. When you have experienced him on the campaign trail, you know his conviction, his mastery of messaging, his volcanic eruption. In driving business, economic growth, and investment, he's a strategist and dynamo in motion. As a doctor, he finessed superlative patient care that was comprehensive and compassionate, delivered by a physician of the people who put his whole heart and soul in it. This we know, for we have been witnesses for over 35 years to a born leader who fought giants and entered where weaker men feared. 10 men in one, he said. In light-hearted, absolute jest, but hey, some of us could see it. And to those who had a problem, they had a choice in this free country to either like it or lump it as they saw fit. What is indisputable is that Dr. Douglas kept alive Papa Bratcher's bold vision for the good that the Labour Party could do. for the constancy of 35 years of service to this country and more, Dr. Douglas. Tonight, we are gathered here to celebrate you. Thank you. Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, we continue the night with a resounding applause as we celebrate 35 years of leadership of and service to St. Kitts-Nevis by Dr. Denzil Douglas. I call to the stage Mr. Joseph Edmeade. Those of us who served along with Dr. Douglas and benefited from the quality of his dedication and stewardship continue to acknowledge the impact he has had on our lives and on the fabric of this nation's forward and upward trajectory. Our next presenter, the former cabinet secretary during Dr. Douglas's prime ministership, Mr. Joseph Edmeade, will deliver the editor's comments to center us about the work being launched this evening. Mr. Edmeade, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Master of Ceremonies. I accept the protocol you have established, but please permit me to recognize the presence of Her Excellency, our Governor General, Dean Marcel Liebert, the distinguished men on the platform, led by the Right Honorable Denzil Douglas, cabinet ministers and your spouses. Good evening to all of you. My task this evening is to read the editor's comments. A great friend of mine, Kenneth Tilley, regret could not be here this evening, and I read. Good evening. I regret that I am not able to join you this evening for the launch of Making a Difference and other celebrations in recognition of the Right Honorable Dr. Denzil Douglas' 35 years as an elected member of the National Assembly. I do, however, want to make a few very important and brief comments which Mr. Joseph Edmeade has graciously agreed to read on my behalf. When the first volume of Dr. Douglas's speeches, Coming of Age, was launched in June 2009, almost 15 years ago, I ended my remarks on that occasion by saying, with a wink, the volume 1 just covered the first 2 terms of the Douglas's administration, and that there would surely be at least 2 more terms and a second volume. 3rd and 4th terms came to pass, but little did I imagine that it would be almost 15 years before the publishing of Making a Difference and today's book launch. I was pleased to again be entrusted with collecting, selecting, editing, and putting into context a representative range of speeches, pronouncements, and statements delivered by Dr. Douglas during his second 2 terms in office from October 2004 to February 2015. There's a dearth of primary resource materials in Caribbean studies. And the main reason for putting this collection together is to make a modest contribution
to knowledge of St. Kitts and Nevis, the Eastern Caribbean, and the wider Caribbean basin. After 2 terms in office, Dr. Douglas' government and its progressive social and economic policies was seasoned and experienced, and the quality of life of Kittitians and Nevians was steadily improving. St. Kitts and Nevis was the top OECS performer on the United Nations Human Development Index, and extreme poverty in the Federation had fallen substantially to the low single digits. Perhaps the biggest challenge facing the government was the closing of the 350-year-old sugar industry and the successful transition to a tourism-based economy. Government priorities evolved to reflect greater participation in regional affairs and the necessity to work globally on environmental and sustainable issues in an increasing interconnected world. Other challenges included continuing aid amelioration and increased NDC awareness and prevention, and the effect of trade liberalization on small island developing states. As in Volume 1, the speeches are organized theoretically and presented chronologically, and will hopefully give readers relevant information and context to determine for themselves the impact the Douglas Labor government's policies and programs had on the welfare and quality of life of the citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis, the region, and beyond during the second half of this 20-year of administration, and whether indeed it did make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Edmeade. Dr. Eddie Green is a long-standing colleague of the broad and most critical, multi-pronged regional machinery who sat in high echelons of the CARICOM Secretariat during the prime ministership of Dr. Douglas, and later also enjoyed significant collaboration and teamwork with him on pressing issues, including the fight to combat and respond to HIV/AIDS and non-communicable diseases in the Caribbean. Tonight, Dr. Green is another Caribbean brother of the former Prime Minister, who is proud to associate himself with tonight's book launch. I invite Dr. Eddie Green to present an overview of the book we launched tonight, so that we can better delve into its offerings and more readily appreciate its significance today and well into the future. Let us make Dr. Green welcome.
Master of Ceremonies, Her Excellency, Governor General, all other protocols observed. It is indeed my pleasure to be here this evening because I consider it a duty to be here to honor a brother and a respected leader. I want to start by thanking Mr. Tilley and Mr. Edmead for placing in context this particular journey that we are experiencing. But I want to start with the first 4 introductory sentences in making a difference. They state, the most significant decision Denzil Douglas had to make as Prime Minister was the closure in 2005 of the almost 350-year-old sugar industry. King Sugar was dead. It was a momentous decision that ended a fundamental part of Kitts-Nevis' national and personal identity. How could one not want to explore further thinking belying such remarks that, in addition, evoke the curiosity of the reader? And by delving into the ensuing chapters, all speeches to various audiences, all speeches to various audiences and numerous themes comprise a treasure trove that helps us to grapple with the political history and the political economy of our time, aligned to the concerns, passion, and advocacy of a servant leader whose seminal thoughts will no doubt preserve his legacy as leader of St. Kitts-Nevis, his role as a CARICOM statesman, and the impact of his vision on the international stage. This book is enlightening, thought-provoking, philosophical, ideological, inspirational, and above all, readable. Now that I've sold you, you may be rushing on your cell phones to order from Amazon. But just allow me to make some comments on the book. We were first taken on a journey of the thoughtful transition of the economy from sugar to services. And from his expressed ideas, Denzil Douglas knew that the economy had to be transitioned thoroughly and carefully. And he focused primarily in that transition on tourism with the provision for developing complementary financial services, information and communication technology, while simultaneously building human resources through carefully crafting tertiary education capabilities and technical skills with the support of offshore providers and, of course, the population of St. Kitts and Nevis. Always upbeat in his articulation of the historical and economic trends, Denzil Douglas's speeches displayed a sensibility of people and community and sense of their well-being. They provide the evidence and sequel of events that leave the reader in no doubt that policies fashioned by the Douglas government, among whose earliest manifestations were a sugar industry diversification foundation and the pioneering citizenship by investment program, they were to have a positive effect. Among the several emboldened statements that Prime Minister Douglas was wont to make, one that conjures the imagination as an apt projection of a conqueror is contained in the address to the National Assembly on July 29, 2005, when he righteously proclaimed, I quote, "Long live the future of St. Kitts and Nevis, because there is life after sugar." I am not afraid, and so you must not be afraid of our courageous decision as a nation to close the sugar industry. The king is dead, but long live the king. It must have been truly shocking when the workers came to face the reality that for most of them, emancipation was essentially the freedom to choose between their demise outside the estate and their continued trauma and travail inside the estate. Today, our sugar workers can decide to walk away from the cane fields or the sugar factory and at the same time secure a happy and progressive future for themselves and their families. This is possible because the Labour Party has prepared the way for life after sugar. He went on to say, as if from the pulpit, I think it was Joshua who put it so well about 3,400 years ago before today, 1,400 years before the birth of Christ, when he recorded the commands he received from the God of Israelites as they prepared to move to the promised land. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Such was the confidence, belief, aplomb of a leader whose policies, no doubt, had such divine inflections, judging from the many other biblical statements that were woven into his oratory. And the people believed and acted accordingly, so much so that his St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party literally, as the master of ceremony said, obliterated the opposition at the polls, causing the then Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, the late Basdio Pandey, to satirically label Prime Minister Douglas as the butcher of Bastia. It is an appellation, however, not included in the book. But PM Douglas did not allow complacency to set in. His many addresses, whether about environment or education and skills, training, or information and communications, or national security, or regional affairs for that matter, all pivoted around the delivery and consolidation of two of the primary goals of his government and his government's medium-term economic strategy: empowerment and transformation. He said, "It is our government's firm belief that the transformation of our economy is only possible and sustainable through the empowerment of our people." Hence, his exaltation at the Warner Park on the launching of the Youth Empowerment Program through Skills in 2009, where he advanced the notion of the application of technical and vocational training. A random survey, however, of his speeches in making a difference will suffice as an illustration of Denzil Douglas's unyielding confidence in the plan of the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party for the empowerment and sustainability of St. Kitts-Nevis. On the international stage, his speeches on climate change and the summit at the United Nations, New York, September 2009, at the OESS Climate Change Conference in St. Kitts 2012, and his address on vulnerability of small states, at the UN Conference on the Empowerment and Sustainability of Small States. All of these reinforce the sustained advocacy for economic and financial policies that help the wider international community to reach shared goals, particularly to reduce emissions, increase climate finance, boost resilience, and ease the transition to low carbon economies. To the private sector, at the St. Kitts Sugar Manufacturer Redevelopment Committee's meeting and the St. Kitts Sugar Manufacturer Redevelopment Committee Task Force, he reveals four aspects of the mandate, which include issues related to land use, diversification, finance, and retirement policies. On citizenship by investment, at the conference hosted by Henley and Partners and HSBC in Hong Kong, November 19, 2008, he referred to this initiative as the first such program anywhere in the world. He spoke about how it has grown into one of the most reputable and developed programs of citizen by investments. On PetroCaribe, the Energy Cooperation Agreement at Port Pine Depot, he focused on the role of mitigating the high cost of imported energy and its debilitating economic impact. And what he said, I quote, "It was therefore quite prudent for us to consider PetroCaribe as a catalyst for the introduction of alternative approaches to market access, product distribution and retail, and correction of the various pricing inequalities that prevail through creative business and financial and social programs." And let me just quote from one other area on tourism. As it was said by Joseph Edmeade, reading the introduction by Mr. Kelly, the first two terms of the Douglas administration had seen Port Zante cruise ship terminal rebuilt after natural disasters. The speeches on this topic in this current book indicate that the agenda for the third and fourth terms of his leadership, that it was built on the foundation and marketed the St. Kitts-Nevis tourism product aggressively in the Caribbean's major tourist markets of the USA, Canada, and the USA and Europe. I want to just stop with the synopsis because of time constraints, and really to advance two other areas. But before I do that, let me point you to one intractable area that confronted the Douglas administrations, and it was and is the issue of crime and security. And this has plagued him as Prime Minister. And this was the subject of an in-depth discussion held at the Marriott in 2011, followed by one that he had in 2008. And indeed, the discussions and the speeches in the book and his recommendations now form part of the basis of the 2023 CARICOM template for crime and security. This is the prescience of the man we celebrate today. And let me just end with two other areas. One, education and training. I have to quote his words. The St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party has always believed that the most important requirement for the nation to develop and prosper was a modern, robust, free public education system. This was even more so after the closing of the sugar industry and the transition to a service-based economy. The Labour government began by providing quality daycare and early childhood education facilities throughout the island, building, repairing, and upgrading both elementary and secondary schools, providing laptop computers to all students, and by extension, their families. Douglas, a man of action. And this is followed really by what I came to admire, literally adore the leadership of Denzil Douglas. It had to do with his vision about health and development. This was a remarkable period for CARICOM Secretariat when Denzil Douglas was given the leadership of the health portfolio for CARICOM. The acceleration of the programs, the dedication of the Prime Minister, the ability for us to get in touch with him on all challenging issues and for him to help to calmly resolve them. For example, the founding of the Pan-Caribbean Partnership, that is his baby. And that partnership was internationally acclaimed as a United Nations best practice. Following that, Prime Minister Douglas never rested. He took on the challenge of the non-communicable diseases, obviously with a band of technical people, including Sir George Allen. But that was a battle that manifested itself in the leadership that the little CARICOM countries played internationally at the Commonwealth, in the Commonwealth, as well as in the United Nations. The model of the non-communicable diseases portrayed in the Declaration of Port-of-Spain, to which all prime ministers attended. All prime ministers of the Caribbean attended that particular event in Trinidad and Tobago. But it went further because the Declaration of Port-of-Spain became the Declaration of the United Nations through the advocacy of our little warrior, Prime Minister. I could go on, but let me just leave in this area with one other achievement: the formation and the establishment of the Caribbean Public Health Agency. Previously, 5 organizations, sometimes doing overlapping. The vision of Prime Minister Douglas, guiding a task force, provided the evidence and therefore a policy for merging those 5 disparate, separate entities into one Caribbean Public Health Agency. What an achievement. And it is that CARFA, as it is called, launched in 2013, that helped to save this Caribbean from the worst effects of the COVID-19 vaccination. So, ladies and gentlemen, when the history is written, you will have someone whose name is etched in the history of this region, and in particular, in the history of St. Kitts-Nevis. But I want to make an admission. There's a section that I haven't touched and will not touch. It's a section that has to do with politics. St. Kitts Labour Party. I ain't touching in that. But it's not because I'm afraid to do so. It is one of the most exciting parts of the book. And I just have to leave you yourself to buy the book and read it and to make your judgment about the esteem of Prime Minister Douglas and the work that he has done. He has left really a legacy. And the legacy is a lesson for us all. A legacy in which he was not afraid to put his thoughts in a book. His thoughts that could be criticized, but his thoughts also, from my point of view, that will be highly revered in the historiography of not only St. Kitts, the Caribbean, and the international arena. Denzil Douglas, we honor and we thank you for your invaluable contribution to this region and to our hemisphere and to the world.
Our youths must learn about our noble men and women who can inspire in them the quality service they can render to our nation. And clearly in line with what Dr. Green just said, not just the nation of St. Kitts and Nevis, but the region, the hemisphere, and the world. Like the next presenters, Dr. Douglas walked the same paths to school in spaces that, though small, and in the country where resources were not always abundant, still managed to produce not one, but 2 leaders of the sister islands of St. Kitts and Nevis. From his home village of St. Paul's, please let us sit back and enjoy a presentation by a school from the constituency he still proudly represents in the National Parliament. We welcome the St. Paul's Primary School.
All. The St. Paul's Primary School is very proud and honored to be a part of this very auspicious occasion. Our presentation will be in the form of poetry. I will first do a poem, and then the students will do theirs. My poem is entitled A Book Speaks, written by yours truly, Avril Gums. I am a book, very friendly, portable, and very knowledgeable. I'm the best gift that you can give to a person. Why? A book is a gift that you can open and enjoy again and again. But it's amazing to see how so many people ignore me and my family. Pick me up, flip my leaves, then throw me down. Sometimes you wouldn't believe, to the ground. Some judge books by the cover, failing to discover that books are the best antidote against ignorance, boredom, and vacuity. Books keep you out of trouble and makes the perceived unattainable possible. Successful people love knowledge. They always want to know. You must be curious always, for knowledge will not acquire you. You must acquire it. Read, read to succeed. Within my pages, you will find the history told by our second Prime Minister, who has left a great legacy. A blueprint for success of nation building for the future generation and our proud federation. The value of time, the success of perseverance, the pleasure of working, the worth of character, the power of kindness, the influence of example, the obligation of duty, the wisdom of economy, the virtue of patience, the importance of talent, the joy of originating, the dignity of simplicity. The only place where success comes before work is in the dictionary. All these values, individually and collectively, led to making a difference, being an advocate of positive change, people empowerment, and nation building. Yet, he was cursed and abused, but he did it anyway. Ridiculed and accused, but he did it anyway. He was selfless, not selfish, disciplined and dedicated to the cause, persevered stoically through victories and hardships, and did not pause, even when there was no applause. Life lessons. The good you do today may be forgotten tomorrow. Do good anyway. Give the world the best you have, and it may never be enough. Give your best anyway. For you see, in the end, it is between you and God. The journey you will find began in March 1989. 35 years of sterling representation and leadership to the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. The late, great Sir Winston Churchill said, and I quote, "We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give." Thank you, sir, for taking up the challenge and carrying the torch. Thank you for revolutionizing and transforming our federation to #1 in the region. Happy 35th anniversary and congratulations on the launch of your book, Making a Difference. So thank you.
The Right Honorable Dr. Denzil Douglas, celebrating 35 years of making a difference. Dedicated, disciplined, duty-bound, a dependable darling, Dr. Denzil Douglas, celebrating 35 years of making a difference. He is educated, efficient, empathetic, ever ready to help and elevate others.
Naturally nice, so neighborly, never shirks but shoulders responsibilities, has zeal and zest for life.
Innovative and industrious, intelligent, yes, smart, invested and brought investments to our little island. Loyal and good listener, a logical thinker is he.
Lively, lovable laborman. His life exemplifies our country's motto, country above self. Destined to be great, develop our nation to #1 in the region.
Outspoken, one of a kind, made history by being the first Prime Minister in the region to win 4 consecutive elections. Unique, understanding man of valor. Uplifted and transformed constituency #6. Kitty Hill, Ramada Inn, Echo Park, Whitegate Development, and many more. God-fearing, gave generously, guided through vision and advancement through empowerment. Listens and counsels well, learned. You cannot conquer what you will not confront.
Admirable, phenomenal gentleman, celebrating 35 years of making a difference to community, constituency, and country. Sweet, strong, and successful. He is selfless and not selfish. He is simply the best.
Hip hip hooray! Hip hip hooray! To 35 years of making a difference.
Oh, wait.
Okay?
Okay, go ahead.
Clearly, you have to be from constituency #6 to get a hug. But we acknowledge. Thank you very much, St. Paul's Primary School. That's the future right there. With pride, with determination, with a zest for life, and the possibilities that they have seen emerge to the top from amongst their midst. These children are prepared for greatness. Thank you, St. Paul's Primary School. I invite to the podium Ms. Angelique, I have to get this right, Ms. Aljanique Ward, who will introduce our distinguished guest speaker, the Honorable Dr. Kenny Anthony. Aljanique Ward.
Madam Chair, please allow me to adopt the protocol that was so ably established. Ladies, gentlemen, a pleasant evening to all. Dr. the Honorable Kenny Davis Anthony is a former Prime Minister of St. Lucia and Minister for Finance, Economic Affairs, Planning and Social Security. He served 3 tours as Prime Minister of St. Lucia, 1997 to 2001, 2001 to 2006, and 2011 to 2016. He served as leader of the opposition from 2006 to 2011. He is currently still the parliamentary representative for Vieux-Fort South in St. Lucia's House of Assembly. He is a multidimensional servant to St. Lucia, a politician, a high school teacher, trade union leader, folk researcher, attorney, administrator, academic, and consultant. Education. His early education spanned both St. Vincent and St. Lucia. Dr. Anthony attended the St. Lucia Teachers College in 1971. He then enjoyed a decorated academic career at the University of West Indies, obtaining first-class honors. Firstly, Government History between Cave Hill and Mona campuses, 1976. And secondly, Bachelor of Laws, Cave Hill campus, 1983. He later completed the LLM at UWI, gaining this degree with high commendation, before going to the University of Birmingham, United Kingdom, earning his doctorate in law in 1988, while at the same time earning the bar qualification from the Middle Temple, England. He also received an honorary doctorate from the Fort Valley State University in 2013. Among his many consultancies, his work in drafting model legislation governing education in the OECS, cooperative societies, and the public service is notable. He has also advised and represented governments on landmark public law cases before the Privy Council. Legal experience. In his legal experience to date, Dr. Anthony has been called to the bars of several regional jurisdictions, including Barbados, the Bahamas, St. Kitts and Nevis, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Employment history and political career. Kenny Davis Anthony's social consciousness drove him to become active in politics at an early age. His political career was punctuated by academia, or one could say vice versa. He left his first love of academia for politics at being appointed special advisor in the Ministry of Education in 1979, shortly after the St. Lucia Labour Party's electoral victory that year, after languishing in the opposition for 15 years. At the time, he was a part-time tutor in Introduction to Politics and Public Administration, Faculty of Social Sciences, UWI St. Augustine. In December of 1980, he was appointed a senator and minister for education. He has the distinction of inspiring the first and only amendment to the Constitution of St. Lucia to date, the reduction of the qualifying age for appointment to the Senate from 30 years to 21 years. In 1981, he returned to UWI after the premature collapse of the Louisiana government. Between 1981 to 1993, he served as part-time tutor, Introduction to Politics, University of the West Indies, Cave Hill, whilst pursuing his LLB and afterward as assistant lecturer, then lecturer at the Faculty of Law at the University of West Indies, Cave Hill campus, becoming one of its longest-serving heads of department. In 1993, he was appointed director of the Caribbean Justice Improvement Project and in 1995 was seconded to CARICOM, taking up the post of the Secretariat General Council in Guyana. Publications. Dr. Anthony is a published author covering subjects in public law, education, and mixed legal systems, an area of specialization. Political career. Dr. Anthony returned to active politics as political leader of the St. Lucia Labour Party in 1996, leading his party to a resounding victory in the general elections of May 23, 1997, with the largest ever majority in St. Lucian electoral history, 16 seats to 1. As Prime Minister, he formed the first Labour government in 15 years. His government won another landslide victory, 14-3, in the December 2001 general election. But his party lost the December 11, 2006 general election. However, he was returned to the office of Prime Minister following an 11-6 Labour majority at the November 28, 2011 poll. Born in the southern community of Rivière-du-Rire in Choiseul, he has represented the electoral district of Vieux-Fort South in the parliament since 1997 up to and until today. Dr. Anthony is a committed regionalist. During his tenure as Prime Minister, he served as lead Prime Minister for Justice and Governance in CARICOM, and after 2011, as lead Prime Minister with responsibility for sustainable development, including environment and disaster management and water. As lead Prime Minister for Governance, he spearheaded the move toward the institution of the Caribbean Court of Justice in 2005, a flagship symbol of integration. At the inauguration of the CCJ in 2005, he lauded the capacity of West Indian peoples to take charge of their own destiny with confidence, reminding us that the region's legal profession had a glorious past with our judges and legal practitioners making distinguished contributions internationally, including sitting as chief justices and judges in Africa, judges at the ICJ in The Hague, and other international tribunals. Dr. Anthony's vision of an integrated Caribbean, moving towards a great destiny, has also embraced fully gender equality, not just in word, but in deed. He has not only changed laws to secure this goal, but taken political action. In 1997, he appointed St. Lucia's first female Governor General, and his cabinets have consistently had other firsts, female ministers, including the youngest ever minister at 21 years of age, a woman. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you the Honorable Dr. Kenny Anthony, former Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Member of Parliament for Vieux-Fort South, and Principal of legal firm Anthony and Antoine.
Madam Mistress of Ceremonies, I gladly adopt and accept the protocol that has been so eloquently established, save that I must make some very specific mentions. First, Your Excellency, Dame Marcella Liburd, Acting Prime Minister Jeffrey Handley, Sir Timothy Antoine, Governor of Central Bank, And once a politician, always a politician, the constituents of St. Christopher 6. I know today is a very special day for you, and I'm happy to be here to celebrate it with you. May I also compliment the organizers for inviting the students that I see here this evening. It's a pleasure to see them and to have them in the audience. I know that I'll probably bore them to death in a few minutes, but it is good that they could be witnesses to this very important event and ceremony this afternoon. That being said, let me delve into the address that I have been asked to do. I am deeply honored to have been invited by the organizing committee to deliver the keynote address at this launch, an event to mark the choral anniversary of Denzil's representation of the constituents of St. Christopher 6, Harris to Newton ground. This invitation to me is a wonderful tribute to the friendship that Denzil and I have shared over the years. I could not have asked for greater honor from a dear, faithful, and loyal friend. Denzil's book of speeches is a monumental work. His editor, Mr. Kenji Tilley, has to be commended for capturing, by his choice of speeches, the spirit, ethos, and character of Denzil. I confess that when I read some of the speeches, I had goosebumps. So great was my reaction to the impact of the words of Denzil. Sometimes, I allowed my imagination to transport me into the setting of the speech, to witness, to hear the little man, barely visible but peering over the podium as he delivered one of his masterpieces. It is impossible in one address to do justice to a book of such magnitude, breadth, and depth. All I can do is to place the text in the context of the political historiography of our region and share with you the snippets of the speeches that resonated with me, that touched me, lifted me, and left me with even greater respect and admiration of my friend. These speeches have truly made a difference. I want to start by beginning with an unfamiliar theme, by asking, why do politicians seek to write books and publish collected speeches? Nowadays, it is common for politicians to write their memoirs and or publish books of speeches. We probably do it more than any other profession. The question is, why do we do it? Why are politicians minded to write their autobiographies and publish their repertoire of speeches? Mind you, I'm no different. I have in fact published my own book of speeches titled The Rainbow's Edge. I believe it is out of print. Now I am preoccupied with writing my own autobiography, and in a few minutes you will understand why I have chosen this option. Publication is not an act of vanity, as some might assume. It is true that there are those who seek to be immortalized in memory, but the majority, I believe, have more noble instincts. Sometimes we publish purely for the historical record, to provide a chronology of events and to capture historical moments. Still others want their places in history to be judged on the basis of what they said, did, or failed to do. Published speeches have become vital sources of information for historians. Undoubtedly, some politicians publish to correct the imbalances in information that have been made available to the public. They publish to allow future generations to judge them on the merits of their thoughts, writings, and pronouncements. Whatever is written is cast in stone and may be used to measure whether the spoken words matched the actions of the maker. But there is, I submit, a deeper reason which motivates those who choose to publish. Some politicians are motivated by the need to speak to history. Many believe that observable facts or events constitute history. In other words, history is what we witness, feel, experience, and record. And we are all very familiar that phenomena, occurrences, or what we deemed to be facts can be given different interpretations, even if all of us were witnesses to the identical events. Sometimes embellishments become history, not the facts on which the embellishments are derived or constructed. But it would be a mistake to believe that only recorded or observable facts become history. I contend that the truth of history is also embedded deep in unseen actions, in the hearts, minds, and psyche of its makers. In other words, the real history of the events that shape our existence is buried deeply in the interstices of our minds because we focus on the externalities. The truth of history is unseen and unrecognizable. Truth can stare you in the face, but you neither hear it, see it, feel it, nor find it. So there is a deeper mystery to uncover. What is the real truth behind the events we witness, hear, and record? Why do politicians do the things that they do? Exercise particular policy options, make certain decisions, or refuse to take certain decisions, or decide to perform some acts and not others. Truth be told, there are some things politicians need to protect by absolute secrecy that are best interred with their bones. I do not believe that all politicians set out to be evasive and secretive. Sometimes they are unable to make frank and full disclosure because they have to obey their constitutions, their oaths to secrecy, and the rules governing accountability. They too need to honor and respect the confidentiality of their colleagues. Of course, the secrets of which I speak are best captured in autobiographies, books in which the writer chooses to tell his or her story or to shed light on events and decisions or analyze facts and events. In other words, these are the books that take us on a journey into the writer's minds, into their hearts and souls, into their secrets, and into the hidden episodes of their tenure. These are the truths, the hidden truths of politics. All of this is to say that Denzil's history of publication is far from over. It is unfinished. Like many of you here, I await publication by Denzil of his autobiography so that he can draw the curtains aside to explain his thinking, experiences, decisions, and offer explanations of his actions or lack of action. This will certainly enhance our thinking and understanding why, after the Right Honorable the Right Excellency Robert Llewellyn Bradshaw, Denzil has become the most formidable politician that St. Kitts and Nevis has ever seen or produced. To be sure, through his publication, Denzil has sought to rectify a historical omission in our political literature. Few politicians of the previous generation saved or retained copies of their speeches with the intention of publishing them. It is true that in those days, the writing and typing of speeches was always a torturous and messy process. Those were the days of stencil machines. Politicians did not have the facility of the computer to record their speeches, to create their own vast libraries, as we do nowadays. But it is also true that there was little consciousness among politicians that speeches were part of their legacies, deserving of protection. Few of them were scholar politicians in the mold of Eric Williams, Norman Manley, Errol Barrow, or James Mitchell. The result is that we have no definitive autobiographies or authoritative compilations of the speeches of some of our Caribbean greats. I speak of the likes of John Compton of St. Lucia, your own Right Excellency Robert Llewellyn Bradshaw of Verberda of Antigua and Barbuda. These are gaps in our political history that need to be filled. So many have created history, yet they are no part of it. This is a travesty to their memory, contribution, and legacy. Undoubtedly, this current generation of politicians are different. They are indeed a new and different breed. Many, like Denzil, are scholar politicians. I think of Ralph Gonsalves of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Keith Mitchell of Grenada and Carriacou, P.J. Patterson of Jamaica, Lester Bird of Antigua and Barbuda, and of course, Keith Rowley, of Trinidad and Tobago. But the sweep, breadth, depth, and diversity of Denzil's book is simply remarkable. As you heard, this second publication is a sequel, a companion volume to his first book of speeches. The first, aptly entitled Coming of Age, dealt with his first two terms. This volume, titled Making a Difference, completes the journey and focuses on the second two terms, October 2004 to February 2015. This compilation is really about the mature Denzil Douglas, not the political neophyte that was elected to office in July 1995. The speeches are all organized thematically, touching on the economy, tourism, the environment, the sustainability, education and skills training, information and communications, national security, HIV/AIDS, NCDs and healthcare, housing and land, regional affairs, international affairs, the politics of the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party, the St. Kitts-Nevis Trades and Labor Union. In this compilation, there is a speech catering to every individual need, taste, and interest. Despite the careful selection of speeches which appear in the book, there are bound to be omissions. And I am certain that some of you in this audience can recall a speech that touched you but was omitted in this compilation. I remember one. I searched for it. That was a speech delivered by Denzil at one of the annual conferences of the St. Lucia Labour Party several years ago, when I last served as Prime Minister and political leader of the St. Lucia Labour Party. And there will be overlap, as one speech can be accommodated under more than one thematic heading. For example, Denzil's speeches on the scourge of HIV/AIDS appear under more than one subject heading. I guess it's a judgment call, determined by the theme of the address, the audience, and the content of the address in question. As I said, Making a Difference is a voluminous publication, some 508 pages. There are undoubtedly some subjects that are worthy of discussion, but I have decided to omit them in this address. These include Denzil's battle against crime, his passionate speeches on behalf of small states in international fora, his championing of environmental causes, and his commitment for consultation prior to decision-making. In my experience, the best speeches are the ones that bear your likeness, mirror you in thought, word, and deed. A good speech allows you to carry your personality into it. If a speech does not reflect who or what you are, then it is likely to fail in its reach and impact. It will lack authenticity. Its delivery, for one thing, would be compromised. The speech would lack conviction, and the audience would sense it. It becomes an artificial construct. Happily, Denzil carried his style and personality into his speeches. I know because at regional and international meetings, Denzil and I sat next to each other. When his aides brought draft speeches to him, Denzil would pore over them, excise parts, add and subtract, chop and weave, draft and redraft until he was satisfied. No speech was ever perfect for our scholar politician unless it reflected his likeness. Denzil was a perfectionist. Then there was his mode of delivery. Ralph Gonsalves and I would tease him after his delivery of his speeches and tell him in jest, "The great son of Robert Llewellyn Bradshaw has spoken." His cadence and rhythm were unmistakably of the genre of the Right Excellency Sir Robert Llewellyn Bradshaw. Rhythmic, rising to a slight crescendo midway in sentence, then falling gently to a conclusion like a winding river to meet its ocean. Did I get it right? And when he needed to be, as in the speech celebrating the 80th anniversary of the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party, he could be both persuasive and biting at the same time. But more of this later. This was one politician who understood the power of imagery and allegory in political discourse. At a meeting of the CARICOM Council for Foreign and Community Relations on May 4th, 2011, Denzil told the assembled audience that, quote, in Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, we are reminded that if one does not know where one wishes to go, any road will get you there. In this era of global economic, cultural, and environmental and other uncertainties, we in CARICOM must maintain a clear vision of exactly where it is that we are trying to go socially, economically, and politically, unquote. And the best evidence of this style occurred in those speeches where Denzil married his political thought, ideology, or philosophy into his theme or addresses. And for me, the speech that is definitive of that style, that resonates with me, was a speech on special land distribution delivered on August 24th, 2007. Just listen to Denzil for a moment as he married his philosophy to the politics and the history which shaped him. Quote, on July 30th, 2005, the sugar industry, which had dominated the social economic and political life of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis for over 350 years came to an end after long and careful thought. As the final sugar train rolled into the factory yard on July 2nd, 2 years ago, never again to embark on that long and winding journey through the lush cane fields of the countryside. And as that very familiar sound of the sugar factory horn rang out for the final time on July 30th, signaling the end of the productive life of an ailing sugar-producing apparatus, there was suddenly a deep sense of loss and at the same time a thrill of hope and a moment of ease, unquote. I can't be perfect, but I want you to get the drift. I want you to get the drift. This is powerful imagery, poetic and touching, the quintessential Denzil Douglas. He understood the irony of the historical moment. As his editor, Ken G. Tilly, wrote, quote, "The sugar industry in St. Kitts and Nevis had made most people landless. Now, in an ironic twist of fate, the vacant sugar lands were now making Kittitians and Nevisians into a nation of property owners on the very lands their predecessors once toiled as enslaved workers," unquote. Redemption had arrived. Denzil was able to realize the promise of his government in 1995 to create a land and home ownership class in St. Kitts and Nevis. There is no greater triumph for a Caribbean politician than when he or she repudiates the historical wrongs of slavery, corrects a historical legacy, and empowers the descendants of the enslaved. In his writings, Denzil underpinned his views by his philosophical convictions, a point made eloquently by Professor Green. He was always anchored on what he believed. He subscribed to the philosophy of Sir Arthur Lewis that, quote, "The advantage of economic growth is not that wealth increases happiness, but that it increases the range of choices." And he employed that eloquently in discussing issues of health. He preached that economic growth was inextricably linked to better health outcomes and will at the same time yield substantial returns on investments in health. This was a new message to decision makers in the Commonwealth Caribbean. We heard it before, but never was it articulated with such eloquence and clarity. He understood that land ownership and distribution was about economic empowerment and sustainability. He was unrepentant that the descendants of the enslaved in St. Kitts and Nevis must receive their redemption. In his own way, Denzil knew and understood what reparations meant in his own domestic space. He declared that the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party was supreme, greater than all who subscribed to it and made it whole. He constantly preached to his colleagues that moral values and cultural ethos must underpin the efforts of integration and the development process. There's so much more to Denzil for the philosophical outlook, but these will do for the time being. As you heard, the impact of Denzil Douglas on regional and international issues was enormous, especially in matters of healthcare. More than any other leader in our region, he unleashed a new consciousness about the correlation between healthcare, ending discrimination, and development. The truth is, St. Kitts and Nevis became too small, too confining for Denzil Douglas. Too often in our region, we measure politicians by the prisms of domestic politics, important as they may be. And you have heard it all the time. All the time, you have no honor in your own land. Sometimes we do not know, understand, value, or appreciate who or what we have until it is much too late. As we say euphemistically, you never miss the water until the well runs dry. There is no Caribbean leader that I know who has shaped the thinking and direction of healthcare in our regional community as Denzil Douglas has done. Charged with the responsibility of health in CARICOM's quasi-cabinet, Denzil became transformative. He changed not just my thinking, but also that of several leaders regionally and internationally. He made a difference. In his compilation, Denzil's editor selected some 12 speeches to mirror Denzil's thinking on health issues, 10 of which appear under the rubric HIV/AIDS, NCDs, and healthcare. Another 2 appear under the theme regional affairs. In these speeches, Denzil married his professional life to his political instincts, interests, and philosophy. Denzil brought his knowledge, compassion, and professional expertise to the issues of the day. He fought tirelessly to end discrimination against HIV patients at their workplaces, at home, and abroad. He taught us that, quote, there is a direct link between sexual abuse and aggression, including rape, and the spread of HIV. Our legislators and our judicial officers now have a responsibility, therefore, to re-examine the legislation on our books and take the necessary steps to bring forward measures that will prevent discriminatory practices that contribute to stigma and discrimination, unquote. He understood that HIV/AIDS undermines productive activities and destroys families and societies. Denzil reminded us that as policymakers, we must, quote, find ever new and innovative ways of helping society at large to understand that the important values of human enlightenment and compassion must apply to those who are living with HIV as well, unquote. He said, without apology, to all who would hear that, quote, we feel confident that opening the debates on sexual orientation, sexual and reproductive health and rights, and the abolition of laws that discriminate against homosexuals will provide another opportunity to clarify misconceptions that erode the march toward achieving human rights. He issued this clarion call again in the classic intonation of his mentor, the Right Excellent Sir Robert Llewellyn Bradshaw, quote, our societies must be informed. Our society must be aware. And our society must know how, on this crucial matter, to properly strengthen and defend itself, unquote. The results of Denzil's crusade against HIV/AIDS deserve to be shared so you too can believe. By 2013, Denzil was able to report that death rates from HIV had been reduced by some 80%, in the Caribbean, that is. A dramatic reduction of the incidence of mother-to-child transmission had also been achieved. As a result, said Denzil, the Caribbean can now realistically aspire to be in the first region in the world to eliminate mother-to-child transmission, hopefully by 2015. It is true that not all of Denzil's colleagues heeded his salutary calls and advice. Denzil's views were heretical, not always popular, and in some quarters disavowed and quietly denounced. But he persevered nonetheless. And as an aside, when Denzil decides to be stubborn, he can be stubborn. He knows never ever to give up. And he will fight and fight and fight until he gets it right. Understandably, he ended his tenure in disappointment. But he needs to take comfort that his messages were not all lost. In politics, what does not occur today will happen tomorrow. What is sometimes rejected today suddenly has meaning and value tomorrow, once the conjuncture is right. By definition, prophets do not belong to the world of today, but to the world of tomorrow. These writings on health will tell you that Denzil was not shy of controversies. He has had his fair share during his political career. And where my good friend Professor Green did not want to go, I will go. Politicians do grieve. They suffer pain and distress like everyone else. But they are often required to do so silently, by wearing masks to hide their despair and true feelings. The responsibility of leadership compels them to exude confidence in the face of adversity. They cannot be seen to be weak, indecisive, vacillatory, or overwhelmed. I have selected 3 events in Denzil's political career to illustrate these simple observations. All 3 are addressed in his speeches. First was his battle to reform electoral boundaries in St. Kitts and Nevis. The second was the disagreements between Timothy Harris and his government and party, culminating in the latter's dismissal on January 25, 2024. The third was the resignation of Sam Condor on February 4th, 2013, and I'm so very happy to see Sam here this afternoon. As it is well known, the battle for delimitation of electoral boundaries in St. Kitts-Nevis culminated in the Privy Council, where a decision was rendered against the government a mere 4 days before a scheduled general election in 2015. I'm speaking of the case Brantley and others, and Constituency Boundaries Commission and others, 2015 UKPC 1. That decision sealed the fate of the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party at the polls. The outcome of this battle, waged over several years, was unfortunate, as it has left St. Kitts-Nevis with electoral boundaries that have remained to this day unconstitutional. Interestingly, nearly every OECS state has electoral boundaries that do not satisfy the criteria established by their constitutions. None is without sin. I would only say that, in my opinion, the way that boundary disputes are handled in our courts has a lot to do with a failure to satisfy the requirements prescribed by our constitutions. The courts are just as responsible for the flouting of our constitutions in this affair as are the politicians who resort to the courts to deny changes to our electoral boundaries as prescribed by the self-same constitutions. Of these 3 issues, the one which caused Denzil the greatest pain and distress was the resignation of Sam Condor. I know because Denzil and I shared many conversations about these matters. The closest Denzil came to admitting his despair in public was his reference in the speech announcing Sam's resignation to, quote, the great distance that they had traveled together as members and leaders of the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party. He lamented at the time of writing and speaking that, quote, to this day, I'm unable to comprehend the cause of this breach, unquote. But what does it matter at the end of the day? Because the fracture of that relationship has now been healed. And as we say, when we get a good sermon, amen. Understandably, in this address, Denzil had to be circumspect both in language and emotion, and in emotion. And it is here that my point about an autobiography has merit. Had this publication been an autobiography, Denzil might have been tempted to shed more light on the complexities of the relationship that he shared with Sam Condor as well as Timothy Harris. The internal differences within the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party tore him apart. He addressed the issue of internal division in one of his most memorable speeches, which I recommend that all of you read and revisit. The address to celebrate the 80th anniversary conference of the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party. Denzil pleaded with his audience to put the interests of the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party above personal interests and the nation above self, unquote. At the end of what was a marathon address, possibly his longest as political leader, he reminded the faithful that, quote, and these are, for me, beautiful words that every political leader who has an inheritance need to be inspired by and in their own context reproduce it. Quote, we are only caretakers. This Labour government does not belong to us. We do not have the right to give it away. It is the legacy of the Right Excellent Sir Robert Llewellyn Bradshaw. We do not have the right to give this party away. This party is also the legacy of the Right Excellent Sir Joseph Nathaniel France. We do not have the right to give this party away to anybody. It is the legacy of the Right Excellent Sir C.A. Paul Southwell. It is the legacy of Sir Lee Llewellyn Moore. It is the People's Party. You cannot give away the People's Party, unquote. But it would be a mistake to believe that Denzil was a weak and vacillatory politician. I can tell you that here was a politician with a political spine, never afraid to take decisions, costly as those decisions may be. He warned his detractors that his silence must not be misunderstood. As he put it, quote, I have never sought to publicly attack any person who holds office in the Labour government or in the Labour Party, even when provoked to the maximum. I have held a silent and still tongue. It is not that I am weak, but I'm not going to attack my own comrades in the leadership. I will not do that. That's how he said it, right? I will not do that. I know you think I was there and I heard it. That is why, if those who cannot be part of the support of the leadership, then they can be supported from outside. I am not afraid. I am not weak. But I understand that our duty of loyalty for the founding fathers of this movement and the people of labor who I serve. I imagine that a debate is underway about the legacy of Denzil Douglas. Some will ask, what is his greatest legacy? The choice has to be yours, so give me the freedom to choose mine. I preface my judgment by saying that I do not believe that our people have ever understood or appreciated the magnitude and complexity of the challenges faced by our generation of politicians. And I'm glad that the governor of the central bank is here with us this afternoon, because in preparing this address to you at rather short notice, I often thought of the central bank and the many meetings held in these corridors. So let us for a moment revisit the last few years, particularly the 2 opening decades of this millennium. We all inherited economies that were in decline. All of us in the Eastern Caribbean. None was spared. Our agricultural sectors, whether dominated by the sugar or bananas, had collapsed following the end to the preferential regime for agricultural products. Fiscal balances were in disarray in nearly every island. Surpluses on current accounts were a rarity. Primary balances were non-existent. Overall surpluses from the fiscal operations of the government were also a rarity. Treasuries were empty of cash. Productivity was in decline. Unemployment had risen sharply, particularly among young people. Nearly every island was brought to its knees, burdened by high unsustainable debt, well beyond the prudential limits set by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank and international agencies. In fact, to contextualize, by 2008, the national debt of St. Kitts and Nevis was approaching 200% of GDP. That's a quote by Denzil. By some estimates, it had in fact gone beyond the 200% mark. Our social indices, with the rare exception possibly of Barbados and St. Kitts-Nevis, whether in health, education, and community infrastructure, were not flattering, and certainly well below the recommended prescriptions for developing countries. We were all in crisis just 2 decades ago. I'm not talking about the 1950s. I'm not talking about the 1960s. I'm not talking about the 1970s. I am talking about the last 20 years. We all faced a stark reality. How do we, in the face of the collapse of our agricultural sectors, transform our economies to ensure our survival and the sustainable livelihoods of our people? We took different paths to reach the same destination, the creation of a new economy dominated by services. The story of how Denzil achieved what was thought to be impossible is chronicled in the speeches under the rubric, the economy. In my view, Denzil Douglas was simply masterful. How Denzil transformed the economy of St. Kitts and Nevis from agriculture to services with tourism as its main pillar is well known to you, but as I have pleaded, few give him the credit he deserves. Denzil, along with his then cabinet, devised a plan to divest the sugar lands held by the government of St. Kitts-Nevis and use the income as well as income derived from the CIP to renegotiate and refinance the crippling debt of the country. This immediately gave his administration the financial space and respite that it needed. Denzil was able to report in 2012 that the national debt would decline below 100% of GDP. By June 2014, the debt to GDP ratio had declined to an astounding 67%, from over 145% pre-structuring to 78%, with a projected further decline to 60% by the end of the year, unquote. No other minister of finance that I know of in our region has achieved such dramatic outcomes in debt reduction. None. But Denzil did not stop there, as you heard from Professor Green. Denzil knew and understood that the cessation of sugar cultivation and production was, as he said in his speech to the Organization of American States protocollary meeting on December 17, 2006, quote, a major shock to the emotional, social, and cultural landscape of St. Kitts and Nevis. He needed to win the support of his people. His government therefore devised a plan to redistribute part of the remaining sugar lands to the people of St. Kitts-Nevis, enabling them to become landowners and investors in the economy. It was no idle boast when Denzil reminded audiences that the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party is the party that turned thousands of ordinary citizens into landowners and homeowners. As he put it in that memorable address, quote, again, the eloquence, the poetry. This is not a gift. It is what they deserve. The land that they receive today is a perpetual form of empowerment for themselves and their families, unquote. This is not a gift. It is what they deserve, unquote. The strategy was a masterstroke. To use populist vernacular, Denzil killed two birds with one stone. Denzil was truly an unmatched, transformative leader. But he had a soul. He saved and secured the future of St. Kitts and Nevis. What you enjoy today in this land, whether by this administration or its predecessor administration, is a legacy bequeathed to you by Denzil Douglas and the forefathers of the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party. Throughout his tenure and to this day, and I'll soon be finished, Denzil Douglas has been a committed and unrepentant regionalist. It is hardly surprising that he devoted some 19 speeches in this compilation to interventions on the regional stage. As I said earlier, judgments are usually cast on what is seen and heard. Much of the work of CARICOM was conducted in private meetings behind closed doors, the curtains drawn. I dialogued with Denzil frequently on regional issues, from appointments of regional bureaucrats to planned initiatives. Sometimes I persuaded him to give way to the wider interests of the regional community, but I'm not going to tell you over what and whom. He was always faithful to his undertakings. I cannot think of one instance when he compromised me. He was simply a man of his word. He was no two-timer, as others have been. And there were some memorable moments. Denzil was always anxious to invoke moral and cultural values to underpin initiatives in the regional community. In an address to the 8th World Congress of Consuls, he emphasized that, quote, cultural and moral enhancement must be considered, therefore, as essential to sustainable development. Where have you heard that kind of logic before? Maybe some wayward priest in a pulpit might try to mention it, but wouldn't understand the economics of it, but he might mention it, but not from a politician. Our societies must be engaged in such manner that we can be justly proud and that we can stand out in a sustainable way as the best place to live and do business, unquote. He embraced the single market economy with as much fervor as he did with the OECS Economic Union. For him, the integration process must touch and enhance the lives of its citizens, especially the young people whose interests, he insisted, must be recognized and understood. There was no greater champion of the young people of St. Kitts and Nevis and the youth of the Caribbean as Denzil Douglas. It was vital and necessary to tackle what he described as, quote, the dispositions of our youth, unquote. People, he insisted, must be the focus of the integration movement. In an address to the 18th Intersessional Heads of Government delivered on February 12, 2007, he put it this way, quote, the entire integration process is about uniting and empowering the people of the region to enable them to realize even more fully their tremendous potential and capabilities to the benefit of the entire community, unquote. Again, for my part, one of my favorite interventions is a speech delivered by Denzil to inaugurate the revised Treaty of Basse-Terre in St. Lucia on June 18th, 2010. Denzil waxed eloquently. Always mindful of those who contributed before, he told his audience that, quote, those of us who are now charged with the responsibility of this great organization owe it to the founding fathers and to future generations to guard jealously the legacy which has been bequeathed to us, unquote. He emphasized that, quote, we are not here engaged in mere symbolism. We are engaged truly in the making of history by meeting frontally the demands that history has made of us. May I repeat? We are not here engaged in mere symbolism. We're engaged truly in the making of history by meeting frontally the demands that history has made of us, unquote. This was beautiful, poignant language. And it is this quote that inspired me to craft the title of this address, quote, the making of history, the speeches that made a difference, unquote. Please do not mistake or misunderstand Denzil Douglas. Denzil did not survive on philosophical posturing. I was always struck by the fact that he was, to use a common phrase used by one of our regional prime ministers, a practical man of affairs. He constantly championed practical solutions to the problems and issues of the day. Addressing a conference on youth crime and violence prevention on June 22, 2009, he asked his question, a simple rhetorical question, quote, after examining all what has been written, and said, quote, so how do we take back our streets so that they are safe for our children, our youth, ourselves, unquote. It was his way of saying that valuable as theorizing may be, it was the practical initiatives that mattered in the lives of citizens. I believe I have said enough to convince you that this second volume of speeches by Denzil is a monumental contribution to our political literature. As Professor Green said, And you know, repetition has value. Teachers, good teachers will tell you that get the students to repeat and repeat and repeat, they will learn, even if they get bored. This is a book which should find its way to every shelf in St. Kitts-Nevis, not to adorn or decorate, but to be read, shared, and discussed, especially with the young who seem so anxious to forget that a past existed. However, I confess that I know that I have not done justice to this phenomenal compilation of Denzil's speeches. Justice would have required more than one keynote address to do so, and we do not have the luxury of time. Suffice it to say that if I have inspired your imagination, if I have succeeded in inviting you to discover or rediscover these speeches, some of which you must have heard before, if I excited you to recreate in your imagination what it was like when Denzil delivered his masterpieces, then my address, imperfect as it is, would not have been in vain. You know, every generation creates their own history. I have no doubt that Denzil has created his own history in this marvelous land of unending possibilities. Had your Prime Minister been here today, I would have said to him, but I know you'll take the messages to him, I would have said to him, Comrade Terence Drew, the little man has big shoes to fill. Unquote. I am finished, dear friends and comrades, and I thank all of you for being such a good audience.
I believe I speak for everyone when we say that we were held enthralled on every word, swimming with him through all the rivers of words and accents and intonations that Dr. Douglas would employ to get a message across. And the only thing I would say, Dr. Anthony, that was missing was going up on your toes and coming back down. But I think that your delivery did more than just a passing glance. We were taken into the book, and I'm sure everyone is inspired to get a copy, not to adorn the shelves, but to fill us with more of the meat that is left there to be enjoyed. Dr. Anthony, I'm going to ask you please to stand again because we have a little token of appreciation that will be delivered by one of our young persons from St. Kitts and Nevis. Dr. Anthony.
Good evening once again. Dr. Honorable Anthony, I have been tasked with the responsibility of expressing our gratitude for you, our guest speaker for this evening. We thank you for your profound and inspiring words to us this evening, as well as your insights which have added much value to this auspicious event. And I must say that your eloquent and creative delivery has kept everyone captive here tonight, even the younger ones among us. Consequently, I don't think that there are any more words to be said except a heartfelt thank you to you, sir.
Like I said, number 6 gets all the hugs. Our next speaker is the man of the hour. Please join me in welcoming to the microphone the Right Honorable Dr. Denzil Douglas, who will deliver remarks on this auspicious occasion of the launch of Making a Difference.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Please be seated. We have been here for a while, but there are certain things that must be done despite the hour. And so I want to thank those who have come before me and who have established the protocol, especially in recognizing those who are here and whose presence we dearly honor. But please permit me to recognize our Governor General, Dame Marcella Liebert, one who also in the past would have served in my administrations. Thank you, Your Excellency. My colleagues who are here, colleagues of now and colleagues of the past, I want to recognize you all. And there are too many of you to mention individually, because it was really 20 long years. So you would understand that I do not single out every person who had served with me over the years. But I want to, in particular, however, recognize one or two who have participated in this important event this evening. I want to thank Prime Minister Percival J. Patterson, P.J. Patterson, for the contribution that he made in the production of this volume. I want to thank Ken Tilley and his dear wife, Kathleen. They are not here today because his dear wife, who had been struck years ago by a chronic illness, sadly, it has returned. And so she's now undergoing treatment again. And her husband, Ken Tilley, has to be with her. And so both of them are not here. But they are here, of course, in spirit. I want to thank both Kenny and Professor Green for not only dropping what they were doing, but also ably presenting their own impressions of what we are seeking to do at this time in the history of our country, and recording and responding to the servant leadership that has been given for a time. I want to thank them. But tonight, I thank those who have assisted in drafting these speeches over the years. I want to thank Mr. Edmead. I want to thank the permanent secretaries who have worked with me, who on many occasions would have provided the first draft. Dr. Kenny Anthony spoke eloquently of the language. Hazel Ross Robinson and myself, we did English A-level under persons like Dr. Eustace Esdale and others. And so I thank Hazel for her input. She was my speechwriter for 10 years. And that, I believe, is a compliment to me. Halvor Hendrickson, so many others who would have contributed, the ideas, their thoughts that provoked discussions and debate, that prompted what we had to record in order to ensure that the history of our party, to ensure that the contribution of our party in steering our country in new directions, these people all I recognize, and Erasmus and Beverly, for ensuring that what was available eventually got into the hands of Ken Tilley. I want to thank them all for this. So, ladies and gentlemen, and my dear friends and supporters, especially those of you who have come from different fields, those from the business community who are here, those who have been the captains of commerce here in this country, and the children from our schools, not just constituency number 6 schools, but the children generally who are here and who would be the beneficiaries and who will be the leaders of tomorrow. Let us give them a tremendous applause for being here with us tonight. Of course, those of the diplomatic community who have worked so very closely with the administrations I led, and my family members, those who understood my absence, those who understood what I was doing here and not being able to be with them when they wanted me mostly. I want to thank all of them. And Janet prayed. Janet is my sister. She's the one just before me. So she has taught me quite a bit. And Kenny spoke of references to language which is biblical. My father, local preacher, I picked up something here and there from him. And Peter, my eldest brother, all of my other siblings, apart, those above me, that is, have gone. Peter is now the head of our family. Let us recognize him with an applause. So many of you really would have been present at the launch of Making a Difference. Many of you were present at the launch of my first book, Coming of Age. And I am very honored and pleased that you have decided to be here tonight as well. Making a Difference is in fact a compilation of my official statements as Prime Minister from the year 2004 until 2015. And as such, this book reflects the vision and the plans and the programs, the ethos and the philosophy of the government that I led during that period. I consider it tonight a badge of honor to be a member of the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party. I consider it an esteemed privilege to have led this party for 32 years. Not 1 decade, not 2 decades, 3 decades, 4 decades. And in leading this great party, it gave us the opportunity to make a mark, to make a difference here in St. Kitts-Nevis. And I will be forever grateful to have been granted the signal honor, not only of serving as the Prime Minister, but of serving as Prime Minister in a Labour administration, because that is the difference. Again, I stress, my gratitude is not simply that I was granted the opportunity to serve as Prime Minister, but that I was granted the opportunity to serve as Prime Minister in a Labour administration, especially after 15 years in opposition. I want to stress that point because, ladies and gentlemen, we must distinguish between the act of merely serving to look, more importantly, at what is being served. Who is being served? On whose behalf one is serving. I was proud to serve on behalf of the people of this country. The St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party is no ordinary party in the world. And the history of the party that has brought us to this point is no ordinary history as well. And why is it that, ladies and gentlemen? It is because of the men and women who, at the height of British imperial power and might, had the confidence, the courage, the vision, and they were able to imagine a better day and a better life. But those who actually transform that bold vision into the reality of what St. Kitts has become. And tonight, I admit that that was no easy feat. Imagine life here back in the 1930s for the average person of St. Kitts-Nevis. There was no electricity. There was no running water. There was no health care. Almost no education. There were no telephones as such. No internet, no computers. Yet the foundation stones of our great party, the Right Honorable, the Right Excellent Sir Robert Llewellyn Bradshaw, the Right Excellent Sir Caleb Azariah Paul Southwell, and the Right Excellent Sir Joseph Nathaniel France, they understood these tactics. They were all strategic thinkers. And most importantly, their commitment to the people was absolute, total and absolute. As a result, they were able to stand up to the plantocracy, the British Empire, and to whatever obstacles were thrust in their paths to transport our people from places of vulnerability and subjugation to states of hope and possibilities and accomplishment. And these are the standards of vision and commitment that we as the people of this country are called upon to meet today. But not just today, tomorrow, and into the indefinite future. We praise our forefathers and our foremothers for placing the sugar lands in our care, for opening the high schools to us all, for placing health centers throughout the island, for establishing the Provident Fund, the National Provident Fund, which led to our social security, so that the sea of Saturday morning beggars outside of the businesses and the banks of Bastille would eventually be no more. And so during my 4 terms as Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen, I attempted to the best of my ability to honor and to build upon that noble track record that was so carefully and at great sacrifice laid down for us by our forefathers and our foremothers. How did we do that? My administration went beyond the opening of high schools to the expanding of opportunities for university and other post-secondary education. We went beyond the opening of Frigate Bay for tourism to negotiate with Kitts and Hill and Marriott and Park Hyatt. I'm pleased to see the manager of Marriott here and one of the owners of Marriott as well. These were the people, together with Ramada and others, who invested and came here, thereby giving employment and opportunities from the southernmost to the northernmost regions of our island of St. Kitts, and providing similar opportunities for the people of Nevis, and providing our people with opportunities for upward mobility, not only here at home, but in these establishments, overseas operations as well. Residents of the rural areas were excluded no more. When the sugar industry was clearly no longer viable, as you would have heard, we successfully transitioned to a service economy without the slightest hint of social upheaval or public deprivation. A rare and truly extraordinary feat. We transformed this country's citizenship by investment program from being one that was under the complete control of one private individual, really, to one that benefited the entire nation of St. Kitts and Nevis. We made thousands of families which never thought that they would ever see the day. We made them into homeowners and landowners, using the collateral at the banks to ensure
that their children would move on from the secondary level to the tertiary level of education, and thus donned the halls and the corridors of universities around the world. It was because of our courage that we accepted the offer from Fidel Castro of Cuba and sent our students there in droves to ensure that our doctors, our engineers, the economists, etc., would return to St. Kitts-Nevis and carry on the revolution that we would have started. And so, in making a difference, I share through my own 2004 to 2015 official statements, but I also attempted to build upon the truly transformational track record laid down by the founders of the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party. Again, I thank those who assisted, especially those in the diplomatic community, Ambassador Brown, Ambassador Hazel, those who are serving still in London, who have been sent to Canada, in Ottawa, and those who are around the world, in Dubai, UAE, serving the interest of our people, all properly rooted to ensure that we continue this transformation of our country. I must stress, however, that I could not have done it alone again. And to those steadfast colleagues who stood with me throughout the entire duration of my tenure and who strove so valiantly to fortify and to keep together our unique and precious St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party together, right to the very end of the period covered in this publication. I say a most sincere and heartfelt thank you. And I do thank Ambassador Sam Conde, because for most of the period covered, he held the fort at home when I was on the international and regional stage. You have applauded him. He deserves that applause. And so, ladies and gentlemen, it is really an honor to share with you this synopsis of my hopes, my strivings, and my accomplishments, from 2004 to 2015. I thank you all very, very much for being here as an audience tonight. When I was in church on Sunday, I reflected on the passing of my mother. At age, I was 1 year old. I grew up in a family, a lot of us, 6, 7 of us. I was the last, and so I was baby, they told me. They said they spoiled me. I don't know if that is true. But having had the opportunity at age 12 to go into the grammar school, having been in the same class or attaining 7th standard, where my sister and my other brother before her were attending at the same time. I don't know if Peter was still there. But imagine at age 12, you would have completed the education that was meted out to you because of the system. age 12. So I wondered, if I did not go on to the grammar school, what would have happened to me? And that was the denial that we faced as ordinary poor children in that system. The brightest among us were kept as apprentices and sent to the cane fields. Well, when the not so bright, or those who were just as bright as us, went into the schools of a secondary education. And so when I won the scholarship of the Right Excellency Robert Llewellyn Bradshaw at age 12, scholarship for the first meal, and the first meal in St. Paul's and Newton Ground, who would pass that exam at scholarship standard, I went to the grammar school. So I keep wondering many times, suppose I had not had that opportunity, what would have become of me? And then, just this morning in a conversation I had with the wife of one of our last governors, she remembered when I was being asked, a candidate, when I was just about to leave sixth form. And so I wondered what would have happened to me if I had taken up that challenge at that time. And then, having had the opportunity to mix the science.
We're asking Dr. Anthony and Dr. Douglas again for the cameras to repeat the exchange. With equal pleasure, a presentation is going to be made to Dr. Edward Eddie Green. There is a presentation to be made to the Ambassador of St. Kitts-Nevis to the USA. Thank you very much, Dr. Douglas. We invite to the stage the Governor of the Central Bank, thank you very much. Mr. Timothy Antoine, Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. Delighted also for a presentation to Mr. Peter Douglas, head of the Douglas family. Continuing with the presentation to members of the family, Dr. Andrea F. Douglas, daughter of the Right Honorable Dr. Denzil Douglas. Delighted to recognize the role played by a past speechwriter for the Right Honorable Dr. Denzil Douglas. Please let us welcome Mrs. Hazel Ross Robinson. In ensuring that our students at the university and at the high school level all have an opportunity to learn from their history, we are going to be distributing copies of the book to the public library and to high schools. I want to apologize because they have asked that we do this on their behalf. For the Charlestown Secondary School and the Gingerland Secondary School, also for the Nevis International Secondary School, they all could not be here this evening, but their copies will be delivered to them. And so we start with Mrs. Gail Gray Phillip, head of the University of the West Indies Global Campus in St. Kitts and Nevis. We invite to the stage a representative of the Charles A. Halbert Public Library. The book will be delivered, representative of the Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College. I think both will be collected by the Minister of Education. Next would be the representative of the Bastia High School. She is on the way, and we call the representative of the Keon High School. As she approaches, we call on a representative of the Charles E. Mills Secondary School. Following Charles E. Mills will be a representative of the Sadlers Secondary School. Representative of the Virchals High School. And finally, a representative of the Washington Archibald High School. I think this is a wonderful gesture. It's heartwarming to see the young ladies and the gentlemen who have turned up to accept the books, and we hope that they will be inspired themselves to become leaders in their communities, in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, in the region and the world. Thank you, Dr. Douglas. Just prior to the formal book signing, which is upcoming, and the reception to which all are invited, the Planning Committee would wish to signal its high praise and appreciation for your presence. Former Permanent Secretary Sharon Rattan will deliver reflections on tonight's event and special words of thanks. Sharon Rattan, ladies and gentlemen.
Your Excellency, permission granted to adopt the protocols so ably established this evening. Save to acknowledge, of course, Your Excellency, Dame Marcella Liebert, and special recognition to his visiting colleagues and dear friends, the Honorable Dr. Kenny Anthony and Professor Edward Green. And of course to you, I know I am on the last leg, but your faces say that you are happy that you were here this evening. I am so delighted and honored to bring reflections and special thanks on this auspicious occasion. As I scan the audience, I can envision a painting that can tell the story of the life of the Right Honorable Dr. Denzil Douglas. Without hesitation, I said an emphatic yes to the task given here tonight. So I began reflecting on my interactions with him. And would you believe it? I met him at age 18, just a few days after my birthday. I was his first patient in his office located in College Street, a great part of where I spent my childhood. I can recall it vividly because we were anxious that A-level results were going to come. It was my last year of sixth form, and I had a hard boil. And I could not walk properly, so I was hopping around, and my grandmother said, well, a doctor just opened over there, and I went. And in that reflection, I learned two things. I went in and I saw this little man, and he examined me, he spoke to me, but he said, the name Rattan, I know that name. So I started explaining. He said, yes. Do you know a Mervyn Rattan? I said, yes, that is my stepdad. So he said, so Brenda is your mother? I said, yes. So that reinforced one of my grandmother's aphorisms. The world is small. You never know who knows who. You must always behave. I remember that. And the second thing, I walked away with more sensitivity about my health. By then, I was a teenager, 18, eating everything and hiding away the lettuce and the tomatoes that our grandmother would give us. So he interrogated me and asked me about this hard boil and diabetes in my family. And it was on my father's side. So ever since that day, I have been paying greater attention to the possibility of diabetes because it is very strong in my father's line. So after that, my grandmother got me to eat the tomatoes and lettuce easier. So I noticed how thorough he was. I didn't know at that time our paths would cross so intricately again. And I met him again as a permanent secretary in 2010. When I started this task, only this poem I kept thinking about, Robert Frost, penned in 1915. I only recorded 2 of the verses. And for a life as a politician, of course, choices and uncertainty would take up a great part of his life. So the first verse, 2 roads diverged in Yellowwood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down as far as I could to where it bent on the grove. Very often, this is referred to, this stanza, the main theme of this stanza is the decision. And very often people reference the fork in the road. And I'm certain, as humans, we have all met that. And in your career, the Right Honorable Dr. Douglas, you would have experienced that many times. I also wrote down a set of themes that I think that I saw him, manifesting, and they all came out here tonight. The power of positivity, confidence, his art of communicating, his innovativeness, and his courage. All of the speakers here this evening spoke to those themes coming out. So, what I also added, though, I had the opportunity to travel with him as Minister of Foreign Affairs. His energy, that is the one that stood out to me. We traveled to Egypt, not last year, the years are going so fast, the year before. And in his capacity in making presentation at the COP meetings as a Prime Minister, he would just travel in, make the presentation, support, and leave. He did not get the opportunity to see the other side of what the conference was about. So here he was in his capacity as Minister of Foreign Affairs on the floor, where all the exhibitions are, where the vibe of the meeting is. And there was a burst of energy. It dawned on him, well, this is how I can help as a Foreign Affairs Minister. And I would never forget that on the floor that year, we set about to set the Sustainable Island State Agency. It is on the government's high priority list, but the discussions began there. And the other thing I noted about him is his agility in thought, word, and deed. We were battling time zones, and the energy just came. He would doze off for a few minutes, and his light was on again. So those, I would add those, your agility and your energy. Now, for the last stanza that I chose, the Honorable Dr. Kenny Anthony advocated for it, the autobiography, because the speeches in the book would give us insight into what your philosophy was. It would unearth what motivated your positions, what you fought for. But the autobiography will give us the insight into the how you did this. It would give us insight into your emotional bandwidth, I call it. That's what I describe it for you. Here, the Honorable Dr. Denzil Douglas has a large emotional bandwidth. He could not achieve what he did without this emotional bandwidth. So it is time he really writes this biography. And let us know what the meaning of making a difference means. Set aside, give us some more dearth of information to uncover about the man who, as Professor Edward Green said, closed the sugar industry. That was a very tough decision. Very tough decision in our history. What really motivated you? How did you accomplish it? Yes, we learned that your deep Christian faith, your courage, but what gave you that energy to make those decisions, to make those differences? I wish now it leaves for me, because I'm very aware of the time, to thank the persons for making this event a reality. First, to the panel, thank you for your analyses, because I wondered how many of us really internalize the impact of the Right Honorable Dr. Douglas's leadership. It's very easy to fall into, oh, let me just take you back to the sugar industry. He said on the platform he will not close the sugar industry. But how many of us will unearth, uncover what led to that? Have an appreciation for it and what he saw in the future. As you spoke, Dr. Anthony, I wondered if we have really internalized the contribution to the historiography of the region. And I think this book will help us do that. It is a case study. And let us not lose the opportunity that the Right Excellent Robert Bradshaw would have lost. There are writers who wrote about him, but more could have been written about him. And let us not lose the opportunity, the Right Honorable Dr. Denzil Douglas, to learn more about what is behind the man, the Right Honorable Dr. Denzil Douglas. Let me thank also the team who put this together, led by the Honorable Dr. Joya Clark and her team. Let's give them a round of applause. The Forever Supportive Coordinator, Miss Beverly Knight, who knows how to manage the Right Honorable Dr. Denzil Douglas very well. And we would also like to thank his sister, Miss Reverend Janet Paul, for her prayers. And again, our two visiting colleagues, Professor Edward Green, for giving some insight into the book, and the Honorable Dr. Kenny Anthony. We recognize that it was all a St. Paul's production, and we thank Ms. Aljanique Ward for introducing the speaker. We also thank, are the students still here? Yes? Please stand. We have to give them a rousing round of applause. Please stand for their performance here this evening. And I have to share with you, I met them when they came. They were so polite and excited to be here, Dr. Douglas. Thank you. Their teacher, their master teacher, because I have known her in the garden of the classroom for many years, their master teacher, Miss Avril Gums, thank you very much. And of course, the man of the moment, the Right Honorable Dr. Denzil Douglas. I can find so many ways in which to thank you for being here and to congratulate you and to revere you. Thank you very much for your contribution to our country. Mr. Ken Tilley is not here with us, unfortunately. He would have liked to be here with us. And Mr. Joseph Edmead is here. They worked very well together as a team. I know he's very quiet, Mr. Joseph Edmead. Oh yes, he's bending his head. I think they must be really thanked for the persistence, for the dedication to producing these two books. It is very important that we document, and I hope the effort continues into the biography. And let us thank Her Excellency, Jacinth Henry Martin, our esteemed ambassador, for an excellent job leading the ceremony here this evening. I cannot leave the podium without thanking the East Caribbean Central Bank and their staff and production team, all the logistic personnel associated with the production of this event, our warm liaison officers and ushers from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thank you very much for supporting this initiative. And of course, thank you for being part of this auspicious occasion. Once again, thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's just left for me to reiterate words of thanks and to say that there will be a book signing on the outside and a mini reception. I think, based on what I have been told, hardcover copies of the book will be available at EC $90, and other versions of the book are available for EC $70. With that, I encourage you to go out to mix and mingle. Can you please, before you do that, stand for the departure of Her Excellency, the Governor General, Dame Marcella Liburd. As our dignitaries precede us outside, we look forward to seeing you in the reception, to getting your copies of the book that have been signed by the Right Honorable Dr. Douglas. Ladies and gentlemen, have a pleasant evening. Good night. Please allow the dignitaries to pass first.